All right, Vlad. So we have Gene Baur.
Yeah, so
That was great last night.
Oh
It was
boy,
so
we
good.
had almost 200 people.
In that room that
Every
seats about
freaking
160.
seat, yeah.
So now I know why you work so hard on bringing him in. He's actually an incredible person. I'm very excited
humble.
about interviewing.
And this is why I put myself through the hell to make those events, because he's bringing such an incredible energy, and everybody was so happy.
Yeah, I think so.
And it just puts you in the mood for another event.
I know, it's good.
So
We're doing the right thing.
With Gene is very easy. He loves our tofu omelet. So we'll make an omelet. I'll have spaghetti squash, and I want you to try our green melt. It's really good. Everybody loves it.
Yeah, I heard about the green melt. It's the one thing I haven't had yet. So all right, well, let's go out here and get this done.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. I say it's morning. You might be watching this in the middle of the night, but for us, it's early on a Tuesday morning in the beautiful East Village of New York City. My name's Eddie Brill. I'm the host here of OG Talk, OG for the Organic Grill. We love the restaurant here. We love the proprietor and my co-host Vlad Grinberg, who's here all the time. Always good to have Vlad. And we're very excited this morning to be able to talk to an incredible friend of the Organic Grill and a friend to humans and animals alike. All of us animals love this man. He's the president and the co-founder of the Farm Sanctuary, our friend Gene Baur. It's good to see you.
It's great to be here. Thanks
a nice little applause section here. That was, we provided our own applause for this. And we all got our different coffees and teas, so it's kind of worked out really nice.
We're all wired up for
the morning. Last night we did an event together.
Oh, terrific. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, thanks for hosting. Really
we had almost 200 people, and completely sold out, and the seats were all taken. So that was great.
And there was one seat on the stage, and it was like, oh, no one's sitting in it. And then you sat it, and I was like, okay, we had that one chair. It looked like a very lonely game of musical chairs, and no one was playing. But we're happy here. It's interesting for me because I had met you through our friend John Joseph. We went to, there was a filming of a screening of the film, I forgot.
End of Meat.
The End of Meat, that's what it was. And you're involved a lot in motion pictures now. And what did it mean in The End of Meat? There was a lot of stuff about the future of making meat in laboratories. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, well, I think now there are visions of what can the future look like. And there are also ways to work with our existing system, where people are eating meat regularly, where you have these fast food restaurants, and there are efforts to slot in alternatives to meat. So instead of a chicken nugget, like a vegan nugget. Mm-hmm. Those are all very positive steps in the direction of preventing animal suffering, but there are other ramifications. Some of these foods are not the healthiest. They're certainly better, but they're not ideal.
Right. In what way aren't they ideal?
Well, they're oftentimes processed. They don't have fiber. They're not a whole food.
Mm-hmm.
The ideal world is a whole food, plant-based diet, I think. But I also think that these products, like meatless meats and so on, play a very important role in helping to move folks away from eating meat without thinking about it. And it makes it more convenient. It tastes a lot like meat. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, it's very positive. I think these products are also not meant for vegans. They're meant for meat eaters to shift. And so once we shift, though, hopefully, and replace meat burgers with veggie burgers at McDonald's and Burger King and the rest of the places, then we can start visioning what kind of a food system do we really want. And for me, it's ideally a local, community-oriented, plant-based, integrated, diverse food system where you have like permaculture principles and you have diverse people involved and different ages.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you, and I don't have an answer. I really ask you more like a mentor, and maybe you can contribute. I always have a really mixed feeling, and I don't know how to react to it personally. Like, let's say we have those products available, right? Does it help us? Or we just giving another leverage and another tool to meat industry? And I don't want to portray them like typical vegan portrays them as enemies, and I don't want this. I want to understand it on a more deeper level, so I want to know your opinion. So now the money that vegans or people who prone to vegan food, would be going back to improving slaughterhouses and Burger Kings and McDonald's and multiply their profits? Is it something that we should do, or we should take a stand? Like I go back and forth with so many different dilemmas about it.
Now this whole situation is an evolving scenario, and I do understand sort of the anxiety about, you know, Tyson and JBS and these Nestle, massive meat companies looking at plant-based options, and frankly, a lot of times they're doing it because they can make a profit. But if they can make a profit selling plant foods instead of animal foods, that I think is a step in the right direction.
Okay, before, I don't want to interrupt you, I just want to ask you more questions. So is it going to replace, or meat consumption is still going to be big and that's going to be just growing next to it?
That's an important question,
yeah.
And I don't think anybody has the answer to it.
Right.
But I do think that a big part of the problem now is also international. You know, where a lot of this meat in countries like China and India, which are becoming wealthier, are eating more meat. And meat and wealth and power often go together. So I think that we have some fundamental kind of human issues to deal with here about how do we live on the planet? What is our place on the planet? Are we entitled to abuse and kill others? Right. You know, and that's a fundamental question. And when you talk about power, right, and our relationship with other animals, eating meat is a very obvious reflection of a power dynamic, and one where one group, you know, mistreats and feels entitled to do whatever they want to the other group. And that has sadly been part of human history for a long time, whether it's a powerful human group against a less powerful human group, or humans against other animals, or humans against nature.
Do you find that in America it's different than it is in Europe?
I think that this is sort of a fundamental human reality, is that there is a desire, sadly, you know, there's this attraction to power. And I think meat eating is a very big part of it. And that, I think, is one of the reasons when vegans, you know, speak to people who are eating meat and say, you know, and question whether they should be eating meat,
right.
People get very emotional and say, you're taking my meat away, you're taking my choice away, my power away.
But you understand that because you at one time, before you evolved, you were a meat eater, so you understand, there's a barbecue and it reminds me of my time when I was hanging out with Uncle John and whatever. So you can't blame people for having the emotions. How can we change that emotion?
I think that we try to create a positive feeling about doing positive things. And
like that.
You know, so for me, yes, I grew up eating meat,
right,
like everybody around me, and it was the norm. You know, we're social animals, we tend to do what those around us do. So what I think ultimately needs to happen is we need to create new norms. And in the ideal world, you wouldn't necessarily have fast food restaurants.
Right.
You'd have a different kind of food system with healthier food, locally grown, consumers more connected to farmers. In fact, more people even growing their own food. You know, there's the Food Not Lawns movement, for example,
nice.
Community gardens, community-supported agriculture programs, farmers markets are expanding. So that type of agriculture to me feels a lot better than the industrial type monocrop type.
I always wonder, we have a lot of customers who either been born vegan or have kids who are vegan from birth, and it's a completely different dynamic, it's quite opposite. It's a dilemma, like how those kids are dealing with other people, like the teachers who they respect and trust, and they eat animals. And
no, this is a big shift. What is what is our place on the planet, right? And how do we live with other creatures? And how do we live with respect and kindness? I think that's bottom line is, how do we live with respect and kindness? Most people would rather live kindly instead of living in a violent way. So, but most people grow up with habits that are very harmful to other animals and the earth, and ultimately to themselves. So how do we shift? And it's going to be step-by-step, incremental, I think.
Right, it's evolving. Again, it's evolving. You know, when you grow up, you see everyone smoking around you, you know, so maybe you smoke because you think it's cool. You know, and the same thing with food, the same thing, the way we eat, there's an emotional attachment to it. Now, the emotions need to change, but it has to evolve, because oftentimes, and you have the same thing, Vlad, is there are non-vegans who we need to talk to. Not, you know, I mean, the minute they hear the word vegan, they freeze or they joke.
Yeah, I stopped doing it a long time ago. I just bring people for good food and discussion. Like, I don't even say that it's vegan or not. Let's have a meeting and let's have some food. And that's what we're going to have now. Okay. And before I go bring the food, I wanted to know about your transformation, right? You've been raised by in a family of 6 kids. You went to private school. Like, I spoke to Eddie before. He's like, how is this all come together? Kids in their childhood don't dream of becoming animal activists, right? Like, how did you get to this? Yeah. Let me bring the food.
Yeah, and to say, I didn't dream I'd be a comedian. You don't do that. It's like, how does someone, because when you were doing this was 1986.
Yes.
And
oh my.
Yeah.
So okay. It's like a vegan omelet, right?
Yes.
Or an omelet. A vegan omelet because I know how much.
I love it. I love it. Yes, yes.
So
this is tofu omelet.
Yes.
So what was it like for you before 1986 when you were a kid growing up, before you said, okay, I want to be an activist?
Yeah, well, early on, I didn't actually say I want to be an activist.
Right.
I just grew up seeing a lot of harmful things happening around me. I didn't want to participate in them.
Gotcha.
And so for me, I was actually encouraged to become an engineer or to do these things that,
steady income and
that you're encouraged to do in a middle class American family. And it just didn't feel good. So I didn't want to go that way. I wanted to deal with some of the problems in the world. And so I started volunteering with human rights organizations, environmental organizations. And as time went, I learned about factory farming and how problematic.
And that was the first thing, the factory farming is the thing that...
Well, it was sort of incremental. The first time I learned about cruelty to farm animals was when my grandmother told me about how calves raised for veal are chained by the neck in small crates their whole lives. And in high school I said, I'm never eating veal. And then I remember also in high school coming home and my mother had made a chicken dinner. And I saw a dead bird on the plate on his or her back with the legs and wings attached. And I saw an animal there, and I did not eat that chicken that night. And I did not eat meat for a lot of high school. But those images, that image of the dead chicken and my grandmother's message about animals sort of faded a little bit back. And then I kind of got back in the habit of eating animals without really thinking about it. And again, you're in this environment where that's the norm.
Right.
But then when I got involved very much with environmental groups, spending time with activists, learning more about these issues, it then became clear that this was a system that was very, very harmful.
And how did you connect with those people?
Well, I grew up in California,
right.
And for 1 year I did this, and I did some dabbling, I guess, in activism there. But then I did an exchange program to Rhode Island. So then I was in a different place. And for half of the year, I was in Washington, D.C., working with an activist group. So once I got sort of on the road into these new environments, I started connecting with lots of activists, and then really got deep into it. And I've been there since, basically.
So that's what led you to apply to Cornell agriculture program?
Well, I co-founded Farm Sanctuary in 1986, and we started investigating factory farms, rescuing animals, beginning our sanctuaries. Then we got the farm in upstate New York and moved up there in like 1990. Which was not very far from Cornell. So then I applied, and I was a vegan activist, going to agricultural economics classes, animal science classes. I remember there was this one time I'm in an animal science class, which is sort of where they teach you the worst of the worst. They show you horrible things they do to animals. And they were warning us about people like me not knowing I was in the audience.
Yeah, right.
It was hilarious. So it was this whole class that they're talking about, when we're in the animal barns, you might see these people hanging around, and if you do, you want to call the authorities because they're these animal rights vegans and they're going to create trouble.
I wanted to ask you also, majority of your work is about farm animals, right? And I understand, and knowing your background, you do it for a reason, but it's hard for me to grasp it completely. Like, ultimately those animals are going to be killed and served, okay? So a lot of your work was about caged animals and stuff. How important it is, it is important. I just want to understand your thinking behind it. Like, those ultimately all those animals are going to be killed and served. Yeah. So what changing the care level and stuff, how does it change anything?
Well, less bad is better than more bad. Less suffering is better than more suffering. So if we can alleviate suffering in the short term, while in the long term, ultimately trying to prevent any slaughter at all. Right. So I think you need to do both. prevent cruelty as much as possible while trying to promote and create a new food system that is plant-based. The problem is we have massive government subsidies, we have massive infrastructures in place right now that promote this current animal-based factory farming system. So it's going to be incremental efforts to dismantle that. Some of these are going to be preventing certain cruelties, which, by the way, also helps to raise awareness, gets people thinking about these issues, talking about these issues, and then constantly talking about the benefits of eating plants instead of animals, how that's good for the animals, it's good for the earth, and it's good for us. A lot of times people do things, because they want to be healthier. So
right. Now also, when you're in school and they're talking about people like you, well, there's also in the government and in politics, there's also a lot of people like you. They say, look, we're trying to make money here, and people like Gene are around, and they're a pain in the ass. We're trying to make this happen.
Yeah.
Do you ever get scared?
It doesn't sound like very polite, like you saying. I mean, doing investigative work is not necessarily getting your friends, right?
No.
And
those are
investigating those monsters can be dangerous. Did you ever fear for your life?
Well, there were times that people came after me. Like one guy came after me with a shovel once, and
what was that? What are you talking about?
This was at a stockyard in California, and we were documenting the mistreatment of downed animals too sick to walk. And the guy did not want us there. Of course. And when he saw us, he came after us with a shovel. So there's been a number of times when I've been kind of shook, and because people are very upset to see us there. I actually think in some cases they don't necessarily feel very good about what they're doing.
Right, you said that last night.
We come in and say,
and exposing it,
what you're doing is problematic, and they just don't know how to deal with it. Right?
What about on the political level? This is just a guy in his farm and his shovel. What about someone who has a pen and a piece of paper, and they're using that as a weapon?
To pass the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, for example,
right,
which labels activists like us as terrorists.
Yeah.
So there are, the animal agriculture is very entrenched in politics in Washington, D.C., and also in state legislatures. And for many years, they've tried to label animal activism as terrorism. They've also tried to pass ag-gag laws and have succeeded in a number of states, making it illegal to actually talk about what happens in factory farms.
You had mentioned the milk scenario.
Also now with all these plant-based milks replacing cow's milk, and there's this push by the dairy industry to say that you cannot use the word milk to sell soy milk or to describe soy milk or almond milk. So they're trying to own the term milk. Same thing, they're also trying to own the term meat because they feel threatened by companies like Beyond Meat.
Right.
So I think that shows that there is those products like Beyond Meat and the soy milks and so on are playing a very positive role in replacing animal products with plant products. It still remains to be seen just what the long term looks like. Whether big meat companies, by investing in plant-based, are just broadening their portfolio, or if they're replacing their meat portfolio part with plant parts. So
So what kind of theories do you use? That you have to have a plan in place for yourself and fellow activists, right? What kind of plan do you have in place to be a counter to what's going on here?
This industry is so complex and intermingled with so many things: insurance, pharmaceuticals, banking, real estate, tax law. Plus animal welfare and so many things. So, but I try to apply broad principles. Things like creating relationships, with other animals, with other people, with the earth, that are based on mutuality, instead of relationships that are based on extraction and exploitation, which is what animal agriculture is predicated on. So I think applying principles and then trying to figure out, okay, in this particular scenario, is this approach extractive or is it mutual? And just looking at those and trying to apply that. But we need to look at systems. Right now, the dairy industry gets billions of dollars a year in government subsidies. Much of that money is going to small dairy farms who are struggling and who are going to be going out of business very soon. And so instead of perpetuating their struggle, which this government money is doing, help them transition into something else.
Right, like we'd have to do with coal or
I always
stuff
thought
like
that organic certification kind of prolongs this thing because we are giving these people ability to sell food at the premium price, and it's kind of not doing good for the industry, just prolonging it.
You know, this is where you get into the whole economics of it, right? It's complex. But you know, one thing I'll just mention too on the dairy industry, there was a report that came out a year ago that looked at dairy industry income. Over 70% is from government programs. So that just shows how unsustainable it is. Now, when you talk about price, right? Another thing I think that needs to happen is that, you know, the price of food has kept going down, 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 and in proportion to how price of food has gone down, the price of our healthcare has gone up.
Right.
So I think, you know, changing things at changing things at the front end, so consumers pay more for their food, people who produce the food get a fair pay. Because right now what's happening is farm workers are really, their labor is extracted and they're not being treated very well. So that's a big part of this big system that we need to look at. And agriculture, by the way, in addition to being exempt from animal welfare laws, exempt from environmental laws, they're exempt from labor laws.
You serious?
Yes. This is
Wow,
an industry
I
that's
never
extremely
heard of
powerful. They've been able to exempt themselves from basic decency in so many different ways. And there's these right to farm laws that give farmers all sorts of legal power to do things that most people can't do.
So Eddie and me discussed it, that you almost became like a rock star for vegans, and you met all these people like Oprah, Tony Robbins. Who was instrumental in getting the message across? I mean, I understand you met so many people, but who was helping you on your way?
You know, so much of this work really is grassroots. It's people in the communities getting out in the streets, talking to their friends and neighbors and family, talking to local businesses. A lot happens there, actually. And then, you know, thankfully there are celebrity voices that will lend support to this.
It's important in everything.
It's all important. I think of an air game, you know, where you're kind of reaching people through the airwaves, and a ground game.
Right.
Where you have people on the ground. Both of those are very important.
But my point, and it's something I don't know if you think about, is when you become, and he used the term, rock star. Now, first of all, it must feel good for you to be able to, you know, I'm a performer, so I'm watching you on stage. You're passionate about what you talk about, but there must be an enjoyment in there, a satisfaction. And what's that like for you?
You know, for me, it's about connecting.
I know you're humble, but I want to know how it's changed your life in a certain way.
Well, I mean, it does feel very good to be appreciated and you know, but you know, in this work, you know, as human beings, you know, ego is a problem, right? And it's something just to be mindful of.
Unless you use it in a positive way.
Yeah, that's right. Unless you use it in a positive way, which again has to do with power and humility.
Right, which is okay.
Yeah.
Power is okay if it's used in a terrific way.
It comes with responsibility.
There you go.
Yes. And so I feel very grateful that I'm in the position I am in, that I'm able to reach people, and that many folks are interested in what I say and the work we do. You know,
like Jon Stewart.
Yes,
you know.
yes. He and his wife have their own sanctuary in New Jersey now, and there are now hundreds of sanctuaries around the world, which is really beautiful to see. But you know, when people start acting in a way that's aligned with their own values and interests, you know, so for me, it's really about changing our world, creating a compassionate world, and providing support as much as possible to anybody who wants to take steps in that direction.
Okay, and before we move on, we have a little segment that we have in the program that we're going to cut to. It's our friend Rachel Atchison.
Oh yeah.
You know Rachel?
Yes, I do.
Rachel's amazing, and I met her through Vlad, and she has brought Meatless Mondays to the schools in New York. We love her, and we're going to cut right now to another News You Can Use with Rachel Atchison. We'll be right back.
Thanks, guys. This is Rachel Atchison with OG Talks News You Can Use. Today I'm going to chat about Everhope Capital, a venture capital firm by the Anderson family who is truly trying to change the world to be more humane, more equitable, healthy, sustainable, etc. So they are investing in companies all over the world. A couple of my favorite companies are Geltor. They're creating a vegan gelatin out there. So for those who have been missing vegan gummy bears, don't worry, they'll soon be back. But more importantly, they're actually replacing a lot of gelatin that's in makeup products, etc. They invested in New Moo cheese, which is on a lot of my favorite cheesy pizzas across town. Good Catch Foods, which is an amazing product in Whole Foods that's offering plant-based seafood. Blue Nalu, who's using cellular aquaculture to make cell-based fish products. Wild Earth, another favorite, trying to get our pets to be plant-based. So pets can be a healthy vegan, they can have a healthy vegan diet, and Wild Earth is trying to make that happen for them. Thanks so much. This is News You Can Use with OG Talks.
These pickles are amazing. And that's not even including food. Thank you, Rachel, so much, as always. So we're back here with our friend Jean Baur. So much fun last night, and that you come here. I mean, I know you're off to DC from here. How much traveling do you do?
You know, some years it's more than others, but I probably am on the road about 40% of the time. You know, so pretty much, but not as much as it used to be in the past.
Do you mind it? Do you ever sit there and go, I just want to get back to my own bed?
Sometimes, but you know, it is also nice to travel and to meet different people around the country or around the world who are doing activism, who are aligned with the vision that we have of a more compassionate world. And so it is in many ways energizing, but also it can be tiring to just travel.
Yeah, I know.
so
I'm a
much.
comedian. I love traveling the world. I love seeing different places. And every once in a while, I'll wake up and go, "Oh my God, what city am I in?"
Yeah,
and
that
you know,
happens.
and then you get a negative thing goes through your head, like, "Oh, I just want to get home," blah blah blah. And then you do something like what I do for a living, and you go, "Oh, now I know why I'm on the road." It must be the same for you.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it also has shown me the importance of taking care of yourself.
Right.
Right. You know, you need to get enough sleep. You need to drink enough water.
And you need to eat plant-based
Good.
food,
Absolutely.
which is really great. Now,
So I'm curious, like, what are you working on now? Like, what do you need? Like, what's your biggest struggle? So maybe
we can help.
we can help, or people can.
First of all, farmsanctuary.org is where you go to. Please go to farmsanctuary.org.
And Jean is doing tours, and they have a lot of people on the farm to help, and you can even have ability to stay there for a couple of
Yes, we
days,
have.
especially for Thanksgiving, right?
Yes. For Thanksgiving every year we do our celebration for the turkeys, where the turkeys are the guests of honor. We feed
That's
them
great.
instead of eating them, and people come, and it's a wonderful event. So we do that every year in November at our farms in New York and California.
Right.
And we also just encourage people to get involved, to pay attention, and on a daily basis to make choices about their food that are based on compassion instead of based on apathy or supporting a system that's causing harm. And for people who want to go vegan, great, but every step in that direction is great. Every step is positive. And so we honor every incremental move in the right direction.
So before we go, how can we help you? How can the people here help?
Well, go to our website, farmsanctuary.org. You can contribute to the work we do. We're a nonprofit organization, so everything we do is based on the support people contribute to us. And then come visit the farm. Meet these animals, get to know them as friends, not food. Look into the eyes of a cow, rub a pig's belly, watch them flop over and grunt in pleasure. And
it's not only the animals that the pleasure. I remember watching the film that you were at, and the humans. As a human, you get this pleasure to see, when you have a turkey act like a puppy, and
interacting with animals in a positive way is good for animals. It's good for us. It actually lowers blood pressure. It lowers stress levels. Contrasting that with working in a slaughterhouse,
right?
Which is horrible for animals and it's horrible for people. So the sanctuary is, I think, where most people would rather be than the slaughterhouse.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Jean, for coming by. We have this amazing food to eat.
Yes.
Here, and it's all plant-based, and it's all delicious, and it has all the flavors thanks to Vlad and his people here at Organic Grill. We appreciate you folks. Please write in. Please review each episode. That really helps us out a lot. Even if you don't like us say some things, or that you didn't like the shirt or whatever, that you're not a Mets fan, but if you're like me, if you're a Mets fan, you really are a sucker.
You die Mets fan.
We need a plant-based baseball team in New York that actually, I don't even know what I'm saying.
It's the Mets and the Jets.
The Mets and the Jets and the Nets, and I'm going to eat some food. I don't know. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day, everyone.
And thank you for creating this event with us.
Oh,
It
thank
was
you.
wonderful.
Really enjoyed it. Yes.
Great. All right, let's chat.
Yay.
Yay.